Why did Trump win? How did Trump win? The questions that are being asked. And I think for political purposes and to make people feel good about themselves, everyone is choosing to go with the answer that makes them look the best, makes them look most correct. So if you're a MAGA person, you're out there saying it's because just every American, they just want Trump. They want him. And if you're someone who's further to the left, you'll say it's because Harris didn't go far enough to the left. If you're someone who's more centrist, you'll say it's because Harris didn't campaign enough to the center. Some people are saying it's because she didn't pick Josh Shapiro. Some people are saying if she had said this particular line on this issue or that issue, or that Biden dropped out too late, or he shouldn't have dropped out at all, or he shouldn't have run in the first place. And any one of these issues, depending on where you were arguing on those things before the election, retrospectively, people then say, it was that I knew that I was correct, or I'm now saying that's what I believed. But actually, none of those things. None of those things are at the core of why we can assume, while we'll be more forensically breaking down for years how this happened, none of those things are the simple answer that people think they are. There is one more simple answer, which is what I want to talk about in this segment, but I'd ask everyone to have some humility. The grief people are experiencing, the rage, justified. And throughout the show, we'll talk about how I think we should deal with that, which is manifesting it into action and into activism. And while the pain that Trump could inflict is real, I'm not going to ignore that, and probably near inevitably will inflict, so real. We can't control that now. The fact that he's going to have the power to do that, we can control how we respond and working to minimize that. But as we explore why did this happen? Did Kamala make a bad decision here? The simple answer seems to be this. Public Notice, the Substack that Aaron Rupar launched, this particular article authored by Noah Berlotsky wrote this: the global anti-incumbent backlash doomed Kamala Harris. Tragically, the beneficiary happened to be Donald Trump. Donald Trump's triumph on Tuesday night is terrifying and traumatizing. It's natural to look for someone to blame, and unavoidable that Kamala Harris's campaign catches some of it. And talks about how no campaign's perfect, but this idea that she must have made some huge blunder to lead to this, it would be more convincing if there was a super narrow victory at issue. But the clear Trump victory makes us have to zoom out and think, is there something more structural here? There's an argument that the electorate was sour on the Democrats for reasons that didn't necessarily have to do with either Harris or Trump. Throughout the Democratic world, incumbents have struggled since the COVID crisis in 2020 and its subsequent economic dislocations, including global high inflation. The fact that Harris's loss may be structural does not mitigate the coming horrors of an unfettered Trump administration, but it may help us think about how to focus resistance as we head towards a frightening future. Another thing I've heard people say is that the authoritarianism of Trump is something that all of the people who voted for him want. I think it would be really tough to move forward if we believed that. I don't believe that. I think too many want that authoritarianism, and that's disturbing. But the voting bloc that can be reached, or the people that stayed home, as millions did who would otherwise be Democratic voters, they are impacted more so by something structural, something global that I've been afraid of this whole time because I've seen the confusion in the polling, mainly, and in my personal discussions with people. So many people wrongly blame Biden-Harris, blame Democrats for something that actually they helped to minimize the pain in relation to. In the data, in the facts, as I've spent years outlining, it is clear and undeniable that we in the United States had a more successful recovery, in part because of the policies of Democrats, than any other country on the planet. But people don't vote because Luke lays out a good study about this. People vote based on the feelings they have about the economy, and the economy played a big role in this as well as other issues. And people feel like they want to punish the party and the people currently in power because the status quo is painful because of things that came of that pandemic era. Before going further in this excellent reporting, let me jump over to Chris Hayes on MSNBC.
But there's a question of why it happened and what comes next. And I do actually think it's really important to be as clear-eyed as possible about why it happened and what happened. Donald Trump won a majority of votes in the Electoral College, and for the first time in his 3 presidential runs, he appears poised to win the national popular vote. But if you look at why he won, I also think it's clear it was primarily the driver, a rejection of the status quo in a period where many voters feel alienated from their leaders and squeezed by high prices. The right track, wrong track numbers were 2-to-1, people saying the country's on the wrong track. And here's the thing that's really important. They feel that way across the Western world, where incumbent parties, left, right, and center, have met the exact same electoral fate post-COVID in an era of exploding inflation that no one had experienced in 30 years. This was an election defined by a rejection of a status quo that big majorities did not like, even people that voted for Kamala Harris.
Right. And as devastating as the consequences will be, to get our heads around this, we have to contend with the fact that misinformation and misunderstanding really can swing elections. That people misunderstanding the cause of the inflation, the cause of the pain for people in their lives, the cause of the feelings they're having, can lead to the votes being cast the way they did, or the people staying home that did. This article notes that it ended up, as critical as I was of this run, because it could have made the difference, Jill Stein didn't cost Democrats the election, and neither did Tim Walz. COVID, inflation, and throwing the bums out actually ended up doing it. In a recent op-ed for the New York Times, Matthew Iglesias pointed out that this has been a brutal time for all incumbent parties across the world. Japan's conservative Liberal Democratic Party had one of its worst elections in its very long career on October 27th. Austria's People's Party lost 20 of 71 seats in parliament in late September. Over the summer, Britain's Tories were crushed by Labour in an unprecedented landslide, while France's centrist coalition scrambled as it lost a third of its seats. The Canadian incumbent Liberal Party looks in serious trouble for elections next year, too. As Iglesias said, there's no one ideological through line here. Parties of the left, right, and center alike have struggled as voters blame them for the dislocations caused by COVID. These included shutdowns and recession initially, but lingered with supply chain issues and a global spike in inflation. And while the midterms reflected this a lot less, because something trumped that for a period of time, which was the immediate response to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it is still undeniable that in our country and countries that we compare ourselves to across, as Hayes said, the Western world, we've seen that people wanted to blame, as throughout history we see is always the case, the party and people in power for these underlying structural issues that were being felt. And it's uniquely irrational for the American people to have done what they did in the United States because of the excellent handling of those issues. Yes, even with the polling being what it is and the result of this election being what it is, it's factually true that the handling in the United States of these problems, of a global crisis, was mismanaged by Trump, but then managed excellently by Biden-Harris. And we're going to get to, not today, but we're going to get to definitely before Trump is inaugurated, a comprehensive segment where I walk through here's where things stand. Here's what we can expect the Biden-Harris Democratic policies to do as they continue to be implemented. Things like the infrastructure bill that will be investing in infrastructure for the next decade. We're going to see Trump then come in and try to take credit for a lot of that. So we'll mark, here is what we can expect to happen that is because of Democrats, but Trump's going to take credit for, so that when he does, we're more prepared to say, we already caught this. Another example, our economy is now very strong. Trump's going to come in and take credit for all of the recovery and all of the excellent metrics that he's being handed. We're going to mark that down. We're going to do it calmly. I'm going to try to just scream and be angry less because I'm done giving that to MAGA. We're going to do all of this, as painful as some of these moments will be, in as joyful as a way as I possibly can for all of you to keep you sane, and as level-headed as I possibly can. Another clip here from MSNBC.
We have now let misinformation become the accepted information. It has washed over us. Elon Musk, he buys Twitter, and then he uses it almost exclusively to be a propaganda machine, and we've accepted it. We've accepted a narrative that despite an actually great economic recovery, the vibes don't feel good. So we want to reject it and get something else. And the person we are now betting on to change all of it is Donald Trump, a man who did two almost impossible things. He won the American presidency twice, and he drove a casino into the ground. What will the future hold now that America has just decided that we're going to F around and find out?
And to further bolster the idea that this was a fundamentally irrational decision by the American electorate, the backlash to the pandemic conditions started while Trump was president, and we kicked him out. And now we're putting him back in after seeing that he worsened the problems that we're now blaming Biden-Harris for, to quote-unquote fix them, even though they're being fixed better than they would have under him currently, and better than every other country on the planet, and better than every single economic projection that we had before Biden-Harris came into power. In every single way I can possibly find based on data, not feelings, we have seen governance that has been excellent in relation to the recovery economically, which doesn't minimize people's pain, but it contextualizes the cause of it. And it is profoundly irrational that we're putting in the guy that made it so hard for us to get out of this because of his mismanaging of the original saga of the crisis, in a response to our discontent about those underlying conditions globally that have led to this backlash against incumbents. But now we have a job. We love our country still. Unlike how MAGA only loves it whenever they win, we still love our country. We love its people. And because of that, we are going to work our tails off to continue what we started some time ago. And I'm going to get into this more in a different segment today. But we have an opportunity because of the phenomenon I'm outlining here, which is that often these issues get so oversimplified. Our mainstream media fails us in informing people properly on the causes. They'll talk about the economic stuff without talking about the causes of it. You have a propagandistic MAGA media. And so a lot of people walk around with not all of the facts or completely distorted ones. But what we see is that, or what I predict we're going to see, better put, as much as it's horrific that this happened, our job now is to figure out how we build the strongest, most pro-democracy counter movement, oppositional movement to what's going to be the party in power and the president in power, to stop and minimize the pain he inflicts, while also building towards what could be a massive victory come future elections, because people are going to see now, they're going to feel now, as tragic as this is, what we warned of. We wanted to prevent it, and our democracy chose otherwise. People chose otherwise. So now they're going to see it in power, and that's going to motivate a backlash. That's going to motivate and energize people opposing Trumpism. And as they go looking for what the alternative is, they're going to find a strong, motivated movement that will explain to them our principles and our values and how we can make the country much better and undo some of the stuff Trump's about to do. That's what they'll be running towards. So our job is to make that as strong and influential as possible over the coming years. So to circle back to what I started this segment with, to answer that question, there's no one reason why Trump won. But there is a primary factor. If you had to pick the most consequential reason, I think I just went through it. That doesn't mean the things that you're thinking about now weren't factors. They likely were. The fact that we have this messed up situation where so many people just wouldn't vote for a woman, that played a role. Trump being someone that a lot of people wanted to be in some authoritarian role, that played it was a factor, and it played a role. And the strategic decisions by the Harris campaign, while it was a well-run campaign, that also was part of it. And all these different reasons. And it is so tragic that now people are going to feel the irrationality of that. It is so, so unfortunate. All we can do is work to make sure when that happens, while we work to minimize such pain, while it comes, we also have this movement built, and we keep the faith and energy. And the fact that Trump individually, because it could have been any Republican benefiting from this phenomenon, but Trump individually is the one benefiting from this global phenomenon, is really, really bad. But we have to stay motivated.